Hey folks, welcome to So-Called Normal. My name is Mark Henick. Today on the show, we have legendary Hollywood actress Glenn Close, along with her sister Jessie and her nephew Calen, Jessie's son Calen. This was an incredible conversation for me. Glenn Close is the most Oscar-nominated actress without having won yet. Now, we're airing this episode a few days before the Oscars. So by the time you hear this, she might have finally won her coveted Oscar. My bet is that she will. So now when you hear this, we'll find out if I'm right or not. I know she's up against Lady Gaga and some other really talented actresses, but my vote is for Glenn. Her film, her role in the film The Wife was really extraordinary. So if you haven't seen it yet, go out and find it. You might also know her from 101 Dalmatians, Cruella de Vil, Patty Hughes from Damages. She was famous in Fatal Attraction. I wanted to go down and talk to Glenn Close in particular because she started up an organization, she and her sister and nephew started up an organization dedicated to mental health awareness called Bring Change to Mind. Check them out. That's how I first met Glenn years ago at a conference when she was talking about this initiative, really getting into Jessie's struggle with mental illness and Calen's, and even Glenn herself. Glenn Close talks about her own struggles with mental health problems situationally in her life as well. This when I went down to New York to record this episode a while back, it was my first time recording something for this podcast, and I was nervous. I went in. I had 4 mics, one on Glenn, one for her sister, one for Calen, one for me. I had the equipment there, checking the levels, and I had never done any of this before. So talk about imposter syndrome, right? Just launching in. Everybody was so sweet and so welcoming. It was such an incredible experience. We had a great conversation about mental health, about Bring Change to Mind and the work that they're doing, about mental health and mental illness in families as well, and how it impacted their family. Calen's struggles in particular, and the conversation, the exchange that you're going to hear there that he had with his mom, Jessie, and Glenn Close's reflections on that as well. It was just a really special experience. So I feel really privileged to have been able to talk to Oscar nominee, potentially Oscar winner, depending on how it works out after you listen to this, Hollywood legend Glenn Close, along with her sister Jessie, her nephew Calen. Enjoy the interview. I know I sure did. And actually, this was great because when I reached out initially for you, Glenn, they said, well, Jessie and Calen are going to come too. And I thought, it's almost like somebody had said to me, we'll give you $1 million, but only if we can give you $3 million. And I was like, yeah, okay. I guess. No, this is amazing.
No, I mean, it's so true. I really don't like talking without one of them.
Yeah.
Because they're the reason, and they're living with, and I just find it, just much more effective and powerful.
Yeah. And you guys are all, I think, now superstars in the mental health community, especially Jessie and Calen for talking so openly about your lived experience. And you do it so effectively, too.
It was 10 years ago.
10 years. Wow. Jeez.
Wow.
Even just 10 years ago, the change that we've seen in such a relatively brief period of time, and I mentioned, so we had met in just briefly in Ottawa when you guys came to do the presentation at the Stigma Conference. When you came to Ottawa, you all spoke so eloquently about Bring Change to Mind, of course, which now 10 years in. Can you tell us a little bit about what that organization actually is? Maybe, Jessie, if you can tell us how it started and what it is now.
It started with Glenn and a handful of people who, our first big blast onto the scene was Ron Howard came in, thanks to Glennie, and he did an ad at Grand Central Station with us, and we all had our diagnosis on our T-shirts.
I remember it, yeah.
So I had bipolar, Calen had schizophrenia, and he was smoking at the time. So he said he'd have to go outside onto the sidewalk and have a cigarette with schizophrenia written across.
No one like bummed to smoke for me or anything, so.
That's funny, yeah.
Yeah. So that was terrifying, to say the least. We're pretty much old hats at it now. But Bring Change to Mind is an organization. Our home office is in San Francisco, and we reach out mostly right now to college and high school children, and it's been extremely effective.
And what are you telling them? What are you reaching out to them with?
Well, you can get a packet from Bring Change Your Mind that will tell you exactly how to start your own college group.
Or high school.
And in the high school.
And we're working on what we're calling the college toolbox. It's been a pilot program at Indiana University now for 4 years. And because we wanted to have things that had proven effective on that campus. And so and it basically is peer-to-peer and campaigns that they come up with and then test. And so it's very exciting.
What's the peer-to-peer piece? Do you know what's it doing? What's the objective?
Well, the basic objective, and it from the beginning and still is, start the conversation. Because the thing that keeps people from seeking help, from getting under their cloud of shame or fear about what they're dealing with, is people's inability, because of stigma, not to talk about it. So the simple fact that you can go to somebody and say, I need help, which is what Jessie did to me, is huge. So we want to create on campuses stigma-free zones where people feel that it's okay to say that they need help, and then that they will know where to get that help.
I also like to use the word prejudice. But I just noticed online yesterday that Mary Gibelti
From NAMI?
from NAMI
Yeah.
is using the word stigma and has started some new program about stigma.
They used to be very anti-stigma, didn't they?
Yeah. So, I mean, there are organizations that have popped up recently.
Yeah, so you're ahead of your time, I think, leading the pack with.
We also have a very active social network community.
Yeah.
Where and Jessie, you've blogged for it, and a lot of people blog, but it's where one thing that I think can be very, very positive about the social network is that somebody might be able to say, I need help, or this is what I live with, like that, without somebody looking them in the eye. So that can be a very, very good first step. And then certainly if it's with a community that says, you're not alone, we understand. Because you're not alone is very, very important.
Yeah.
So,
very important.
Glenn, you mentioned, I think you've mentioned twice now that, Jessie, you reached out to Glenn for help. And I heard you talk about this before, that, that it was that it was so difficult finding help for yourself, for Calen, dealing with the stigma? Why did you reach out to Glenn?
Because she was safe. I knew she would do exactly what she did, was put her arms around me and let me cry, and it took. I was visiting down in Wyoming. Our parents used to live there, and I knew I had to tell someone what was going on in my head, and my daughter was with me, and the car was packed, ready to go, and it was like, okay, it's now or never. I need to go tell her now.
Yeah. How long do you think you'd been struggling up until that point?
50 years.
50 years, yeah, your whole life.
At that moment, you were specifically struggling with a voice in your head saying, kill yourself.
Really?
Yeah, I had, I've had 2 suicide attempts and 1 almost suicide attempt with a gun, but I realized my children were there. Calen was home from McLean Hospital for the holidays, and I couldn't do that to them.
Yeah.
I just couldn't do that
to
them.
So Calen, how long had you been struggling by that point?
Probably like a couple years, right? Like I was diagnosed at 19 in the
18.
hospital. I was hospitalized at 18, diagnosed at 19, I should say.
And, did you have some kind of sense that your mother was not doing well, that she was struggling?
Not really, actually. At the time, I didn't, and I'd been at prep school, boarding school, and my consciousness was still kind of developing, I guess, and I was becoming aware of sort of the possibilities, and as a son, I didn't really, I guess I didn't see that in my mom. To the, I know it's hard to see within someone like that, but still, I didn't recognize it for what it was. But
I mean, you had a bit of your own stuff going on.
Yeah,
so.
I was kind of self-absorbed.
Yeah, you did.
You were in recovery. I mean,
Yeah. So, Jessie, then, I mean, parenting a kid, I've come to learn, is hard on its own, with or without a mental illness, although I don't really know without. But that must have been hard for you to try to help your son and deal with your own stuff, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah, I can definitely
very hard.
Validate that.
Yeah. My Calen's sister, who's 10 years younger than him, saw up close a lot of what I was going through. I actually just came out of a depression. I hadn't been depressed for so long that I got hold of my daughter and I said, "But I'm dizzy." And she said, "Yeah, Mom, that you were dizzy when you're so depressed, and I can't stop eating, and I'm paralyzed." And she was able to remember all those same symptoms and kind of helped me realize what was going on. I thought I was getting sick or something, but
yeah. So you have bipolar disorder, right?
Yes.
Yeah. How does, so you mentioned a bit of the depression side, but everybody manifests these things differently. There's if you show me 10 different people with bipolar disorder, they have 10 different types of bipolar disorder sometimes, it seems, and likewise for depression. So how did yours really manifest itself, both the depression and the mania side?
I actually was more manic than I was depressed. The reason I stay on meds as strictly as I do is because of depression, though, because depression is so debilitating, and it pushes me immediately to think about killing myself, and it's a dangerous place to be. And again, I didn't recognize it, and it was really interesting that my daughter did. And I'm okay now, but
so this was just recently. It was the change. Do you think it was change of season or?
Could have been. I mean, I usually get manic in the spring or hypomanic, and I was like, damn. I hope this doesn't happen every spring, because I'd rather be hypomanic than depressed.
This is really interesting. I hear about this a lot from mental health advocates, and this is kind of seems to be a class of people unto themselves now. Everybody is a mental health advocate in some ways, and I think that's a good thing. But there's expectations of people in the mental health advocacy world that you're doing great and that everything is always awesome now and you've come out the other side. So you're saying that you still struggle from time to time.
Of course.
Yeah. How often?
I don't take anything for granted as a sibling.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, a big percentage of people with bipolar disorder end up taking their own lives.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't take that for granted.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been lucky.
Yeah. So, Glenn, you've also mentioned your own struggles with depression, too. So it's not like this doesn't affect you directly as well.
Yeah, it's interesting, though. I didn't have the serious, totally debilitating crawl in a hole and not be able to move depression like Jessie did or like one of my very dearest friends has had. But I had kind of a steady feeling of inertia and couldn't organize myself, and I would contemplate doing the simplest things and it would be overwhelming. And for example, the cap of my toothpaste would fall off and I'd say, okay, now bend down, pick it up, screw it back on. It's like, it's like the silliest things you say. Oh, just leave it. No. So I thought, wow. I thought I had actually ADD because I couldn't get myself together. And I went for a series of tests. And at the end, they said, you're depressed. And I said, what? Because I don't think I come off as a depressed person. I don't know. But,
or that old stigma, what do you have to be depressed about, right? I think people still say that in some ways.
Yeah, but I also think we have so much in our family, I wasn't surprised. So I take a low amount, of antidepressant, and I think it does make a difference. I also try to, I have learned to if I get really stressed, that it's okay to have a timeout. Literally go read a book for 2 hours, or go and do deep breathing, or go for a walk, or something that really can just kind of even things out. Also, a friend of ours, Jason DeShaw, out in Montana, he said that, and I listened, and I've told everybody I talk to, is that we're so used to emptying ourselves out. If we're somebody who feels like we owe, and we want to give back and all, you empty yourself out, and then you struggle to fill yourself back up, and then you empty yourself out. Well, Jason says, no, that's the way we should think about it is you deal with the world with the overflow. And that means you've got to take care of yourself and keep your own cup full. And it's okay to do that.
Yeah.
And you'll be more effective if you deal with the world with the overflow. I love that idea.
I do too.
Yeah. Do you find that people reach out to you now more since starting Bring Change to Mind to help?
Personally, no.
No?
No. But I don't think I think that's because I'm not really in a position to be someone that people would seek out.
Right.
But I mean, Jason for one, and people at the hospital that I met. Yeah, I mean, it's an easy conversation to begin with people who have experience. So, I mean,
Glenn mentioned self-care and some of her ideas around that. What do you do now to take care of yourself?
Self-care. I try and eat well, for one. I think that's important. But I mean, it's just, again, staying busy is important. And I also have the freedom to, make artwork and stuff like that too. So, and my wife, Megan, we have 4 horses and 2 dogs and 3 cats. So it's,
wow,
it's challenging at times, but,
yeah. Can we go back to your art for a second?
Sure.
Because this is a theme that I've heard a lot from people, especially with schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, things that kind of, in my perception, unlock your mind in many ways. Unfortunately, in many ways, uncomfortably so, and tragically so too many times. But I've met so many people who are extraordinary artists.
Yeah.
Do you think that you channel some of your experience into that?
Yeah, I think channel is a good word for making artwork. And I think for me, it's like it becomes like a conversation in itself, the canvas and working on the canvas. Yeah. Especially with painting, but it becomes like this interface. It's like sort of a metaphor to life, and so as I'm realizing things about how the painting is working or not working. A lot of times that's kind of reciprocated by stuff in my life that I can kind of So it does open up a certain channel. Yeah.
And when did you start doing that? Or when did you just discover?
I've always been interested in artwork and always been driven to do it. But I think it was only about not only, but 14, 15 years ago, I started doing it to the point of, trying to make a sort of a living at it. Not that that's panned out completely, but yeah, it's a really important process for me. Yeah. Yeah, in terms of understanding myself.
Back to the prior to that, about 15 years ago. So actually, how long would you say you've been in recovery now?
In recovery, probably for Probably only for about 5 years,
Okay.
5-6 years, something like that. I've been feeling pretty even keel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Even keel to me, just I think it's coming back to the still, the center point. Yeah. And just the pure ability to be able to do that, to be able to kind of drop the built up sort of thoughts, and come back to the point where, you can kind of start over, intermittently. What
were the symptoms that bothered you the most?
Symptoms that bothered me the most were probably anxiety.
Yeah.
That was a hard one to get sort of a handle on, and it continues to be. I don't know. I think depression was a big one for me. Also the mania for me was troubling. And it became troubling, even though it was a good feeling. I was going too fast.
So did you experience hallucinations and delusions as well?
Never had any visual hallucinations. I had some auditory hallucinations and even olfactory hallucinations, but no visual stuff.
So I think I had heard at one point in another interview that your mother had dropped you off at hospital,
right.
And of course you didn't want to stay,
right.
And she had to explain to you why coming home wasn't an option.
Yeah, I remember that, and it was mostly, that brings up like the fact that I was so scared. It was created by so many different kind of ideas and like experiences that it just felt so real, and to be kind of alone, I think, in a strange place, although it was very comfortable and the people were awesome, because I think it's something that I kind of held myself responsible for getting things right. This was a major indication that things were not right.
Were you angry with your mother at the time, or sad?
I had some anger towards my mom, yeah, and she was the one that I'd call and kind of be like, "Oh, you're never going to see me again. I'm going to go into the woods," and and it was threatening, that kind of thing. And there were real feelings, but yeah, so I kind of put that on her. I'm sorry for that. That was not your bag.
It's okay, it wasn't you.
But
are you grateful that she did it now?
Yeah, I'm grateful that. Yeah, and Guy too. And all my family members have been incredibly
our mom.
supportive. Yeah, and yeah, my grandmother probably, more than anyone else, was really supportive of my artwork too. So that was.
Well, wouldn't you say that you had no visual hallucinations, but you would see things that would morph?
No, like the only visual hallucination I ever had didn't register as like a lengthy or even that real, but I was walking in Harvard Square in Boston and very scared, delusional, and I kind of caught the glimpse out of the corner of my eye, this lady kind of going at me like that, and I was kind of thinking, vampires were real and stuff like that, and that was a little freaky.
To say the least.
To say the least, but it really helps you, I think, to understand how when people are in that place, why they would react in unusual ways. Maybe if I thought vampires were chasing me, I'd probably react.
So it's that sort of where reality meets the sort of interior reality.
Yeah, that was one of the scariest nights for your dad and me, because you called me. And I thought you were at the hospital.
Right. They kept pretty good tabs on me, but I got it.
Yeah, so I called the hospital to tell them that he was not okay, and they said he's not here. And I was just, I think there are a lot of parents out there, though, who would understand that that's just what you go through when one of your children
Had
is
you
that
gone
sick.
with a bus load of people into
No, I went
Boston?
with a couple of friends, actually.
From the hospital?
From the hospital, but I veered off, and that's something I would do, is I would get to the point where I think it was hanging on to these ideas and got really angry, I think, and left my buddies and went walking. I ended up getting lost, and
terrifying.
Knowing what you know now, if you had run into yourself at that time in that park or in the woods, what would you tell that person?
I don't know, but I'd say, I'd say probably that, you're going to get it back. You don't have to beat yourself up as much as you are. And, you can attain the things that you want for yourself as yourself, the things that make you who you are. It's that hope that, okay, maybe someday I'll be who I want to be. That's what recovery is for me, I guess.
Yeah. What could your mother have done to best support you at that time?
She did what she could do. Not to say every choice she made was right, but she showed me love, just like didn't get embarrassed by, me or her, around her friends and stuff like that. And we share a camaraderie, with it.
Jessie, did you ever blame yourself for what he went through? I hear this from parents a lot.
Yeah, probably. But I also immediately started reading, and Calen's dad was also very...
Yeah, he was really involved. Like with NAMI, he got really quickly involved with NAMI and actually became certified to teach a class. And this was locally in Helena, Montana.
Yeah, and Calen was living with him when he ended up at the first hospital.
Yeah, when I was first hospitalized.
Yeah.
So now I think
18, but, yeah.
Lots of families go through this kind of thing, as you've found out over the last 10 years of doing Bring Change to Mind, but not every family goes and starts an organization to try to combat the stigma or, so what triggered that? Why was your family different that wanted to take that step? Maybe Glenn.
We had Glenn.
Yeah. Yeah. But even celebrity families, there's lots of celebrity families that go through this kind of thing too.
There have been several times in my life / career where I've been presented with a possibility. And this possibility was do something, even though I didn't know what it was I would do. I know that you talked about stigma because when Calen came out of the hospital, all his friends left him.
Yeah,
and
for good reason probably, but well, I shouldn't say that.
Well,
No.
they didn't come back.
No, they did not.
They did not come back.
They did not.
And you went through issues about stigma as well. So I always ask myself, I could do this. This is what I'm being asked to do, or not. What is the alternative? I mean, what is the alternative to not doing it? And I always find that I'm not happy with that alternative.
Did you ever have a pause where you thought, would this harm my career? How people look at me?
Yes, and I actually kind of still think that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're a family who's come out very strongly to talk about the mental illness in our family, and you never know what people think. But you know what? I don't care.
I was just going to ask, does it matter what they
It doesn't matter to me at all.
Yeah.
In fact, I like talking about it because there's so many people who don't. Or I don't like is not the word. I feel motivated to talk about it. And I like to hear other people's stories. And I like to hear other people talk about the diagnosis because it's a chronic illness. Mm-hmm. And a chronic illness is a chronic illness, and we should be able to talk about it. And it's a huge part of being a human being.
Now, on that, you've called Jessie one of your true heroes before. Both. What do you mean by that? Why?
Because my definition of a hero is someone who goes against the crowd. A hero isn't somebody who's just doing their job. A hero is something who goes out on their own and does something that not everybody else is doing, and that something that takes courage. Now, when I put myself in their shoes, with the idea, because I said I wasn't going to do anything unless they did it with me, because the point was that we would do it together. Because celebrity you can lose credibility so fast. And I wanted us to be totally authentic all the time. And so when I put myself in their shoes, sitting in an interview for a national television show and talking about living with bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, I have always been overwhelmed by the amount of courage that took. You know, and that courage is why we're here today, really. It started this for us, for our story of mental illness, and for what contribution we've been able to make through Big Change to Mind. It wouldn't exist without the moment. And I don't know how long it took you to say yes. I think it was a phone call, and you said yes.
What's changed in that time, do you think, in the mental health world? Or just in the world, I guess, with how people think about mental health?
People are talking about it.
Yeah.
There's still, like, we're from Montana, and I just talked to a guy who is busily trying to raise money for mental health in Bozeman, precisely. And he said it's really interesting because he'll be talking to people, usually couples, who have a lot of money, and they are very willing to put money into other things. But when he brings up mental illness, it's like zip their wallet shut. And I don't get that.
Stigma.
Prejudice.
It's prejudice.
Sort of an inherited
Prejudice.
stigma too, because it,
Fear.
It's like, yeah.
Well, that means they probably, I think 1 in 4 people, as Jessie says, we have 2 siblings. There are 4 of us in my generation in our family. Jessie was 1 in 4.
Yeah.
And when we all have we're all on the spectrum in some way.
Yeah.
But she's the one who got hit hard. So.
And then I gave it to
You can't, there's no family that hasn't been touched by it, even if it's their neighbor. So, and I'm getting angry. I'm feeling my anger build up because, first of all, our government should be funding mental health. They should be funding community mental health centers so people know where to get help. And it should be on a high level, and it shouldn't be, as somebody said to me, if you have a heart attack, somebody doesn't go write a grant so that you can get treated. That's the same. If somebody has a serious psychotic break, and you don't have a place that it is funded that you can go get help, to me, it's criminal. Yeah. I'm also getting tired of all these different organizations. I think I'm talking now way ahead of where I am, but I really want to see us have a unified voice about this in the country and in Washington. And I think every organization in England, they are so far ahead of us, and Canada and Australia. But they have these kids that they call champions who talk about it, come out about it, and then they learn how to advocate, and they go into their local governments and into the newspapers and everything. They actually are active in, getting the word out. And I think of all the kids that we're working with in high schools and in Indiana University, they should be going into their governor's office, and we should all be down there in Washington. So I don't know, it's been brewing in the back of my head, that it's really about time. That
it's infuriating.
It's such a terrible need.
So stupid.
But, I mean, for the last 10 years, the influence that you've all had has certainly moved the needle. We see that every day.
Yeah.
An organization like Bring Change to Mind couldn't have existed 30 years ago, even 15 years ago prior to you guys starting it, Actually, and I know we need to wrap up, but if Jessie had come to you, Glenn, 30 years ago, what would you have said?
I wish I had known, because, I have a vignette that I wrote in her book that when she was little, she must have been about 6. 5. She would rub her hand between her pointing finger and her thumb until it was crusty and bleeding. Now, that's not a normal thing. If I saw that 30 years ago, I would get help. If I had gotten help or knew about it or had been educated about some of the signs of some sort of mental health issue. She wouldn't have been diagnosed when she was 50 years old. She wouldn't have tried to kill herself multiple times. She would have, and so I think the great news is that there are a lot of early intervention things happening. There's a lot of research. There's a lot, and the whole genetic revolution, all that. But mental illness is not just one gene. The research that needed is huge. But
so knowing what you know now, you've revisited a character 25 years later. Twice. So if you could revisit Alex Forrest from Fatal Attraction, would you play her differently?
I don't think I would have played her differently. I would have fought to have certain things put in the script that might have explained her behavior a little bit differently. And that's a tricky fight. But I had secrets. There were things that you knew that she, if she had a problem with her father or something that happened with her father, but it was all kind of nebulous. And she became one of the great villains of the 20th century film,
But even you've described her as a tragic character, not an evil one.
Oh, yeah. But people think of her as evil.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I would have. So, but I think it's funny because Dr. Gunderson, who's kind of the guru of borderline personality, says that uses that as an example of extreme. Extreme is an important word. Extreme borderline personality. So I actually was playing a bona fide diagnosis, but I was coming at it from a different area.
Sure, and a different time too, I
Yeah.
think. So in 30 years from now, and I'll open this up to all of you, how would you like to see mental health portrayed and talked about and accepted? And
I get lots of calls, mostly from mothers who are very worried about their children. I would like them to not have to call me. I would like them to have a place where they can go and consult and have their child evaluated for free. I mean, when you think about how many people are walking around with a mental illness and suffering, and there's nowhere for them to go unless they have hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Or they get arrested and end up in jail.
Or they get arrested, yeah.
Yep.
And our prisons are, 1/3 at least of the people in our prisons?
Largest mental health treatment centers in the world.
Yeah.
Prisons.
Yep, it is.
Yeah. I'd like to see people understand that, recovery is possible, it really is. And it's just a matter of, finding people treatment again,
Yeah. And whatever kind of intervention works for them, There's so many different routes to recovery, it seems. Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for this.
Thank you.
It's great to learn more about this organization. And where can people go if they want to check out more about Bring Change to Mind?
To bringchangetomind.org or just bc2m.org.
All right. And you're on Twitter and Facebook. You mentioned a very active social media. So I hope that people check that out. And I'd like to thank you all for changing the world. This is, you're doing such incredible work.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's it. Wow. I want to thank Calen Pick, Jessie Close, and of course Glenn Close. Glenn, for inviting me into her home and having that kind of conversation with me. It was wonderful. Please go check out their organization, Bring Change to Mind, BC2M. Google it. They're doing some incredible awareness raising work. 10 years ago, their original PSA that they did with Ron Howard. It was one of my favorite PSAs. You'll see it. They filmed it in Grand Central Station. They mention it there, wearing all these shirts. So please go check it out. I hope you enjoyed the interview. Please also, here's my favor that I'm going to ask of you every single week. Go over to Apple Podcasts, give us a rating, subscribe to the show. If you want to hear more about us, we've got lots more episodes to come. Head over as well to markhenick.com/so-called-normal if you want to hear about what's going on, future guests, past guests, some of my own reflections, blog posts, things like that about doing this. Follow me on Twitter and Facebook at Mark Henick, MarkHenick. And then you can hear my random musings just every day about things that are on my mind. It's not usually that deep, but whatever. Go follow me on Twitter. If you need psychotherapy, you want to check it out for the first time, hey, there's a hard transition. Why not go over to betterhelp.com/Mark? If you use my promo code, Mark, at betterhelp.com/Mark, you're going to get 7-day free trial of effective online psychotherapy that can really help you work through some issues. If you've never tried it before, this is a great opportunity to do that. betterhelp.com/Mark. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you again next week.